You're listening to Discography Discussion, episode 158, NF. Hosted by Dan Terry.
I almost wore my unteacher shirt today, but I was feeling too fat for it, so I threw it down.
David Van Zandt.
Gotta look good for the non-YouTube podcast.
And Joseph Wren. Do you like black metal? Presented by discussmetal.com. And if you're trapped in a mansion filled with the undead, but you're not playing Resident Evil, then you are ready for this episode of Discography Discussion. I am Joe, that is Dan, that is David. How the hell did you talk me into this one?
I nearly didn't. The listeners really kind of talked you into this one.
We asked, you answered. Dan gets his way again. Nobody's on my side. It actually wasn't that bad, I'm not going to lie to you.
It's because of what you said about Strong Arm. This is why I'm doing this to you.
This was playing the whole time. I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, and we have a very special guest host with us tonight, Mr. David Van Zandt.
What's going on, guys?
Not much. Just doing... Well, actually, it is kind of a big deal because we're talking about rap, but we never, ever talk about rap.
Yeah, it's an honor to be on the my favorite metal show, talking about my favorite rap artist.
Yeah, we thought we'd kind of turn the tides a little bit. But, me and David have been talking about NF for a little while, and after a while I was like, well, let's just talk about it. Like, let's put it on the official record, And,
let's do it.
This is kind of fun. I'm hoping this might be kind of a palate cleanser for people. And, if you hate it, it's okay. We got so many other metal bands that are going to be you won't even know. You know what, Joe? Can I say that again? Because that sounded way dirtier than I meant it to sound.
Or we can leave it there.
You just bleep it all Jeff style.
I could.
Yeah. Let me try that again. I know that one definitely got beeped. What I'm trying to say is we are still going to be a predominantly metal podcast, but I wanted to do something a little different. And you may actually even find after we talk about NF that even if you love nothing but feedback-soaked breakdowns, you might actually enjoy some of the stuff that NF is throwing down.
See, I'm surprised you haven't listened to more hip-hop because you are the lyric guy. And that is the primary focus of all hip-hop.
It's hard to find hip-hop with meaningful lyrics, and that's what I think NF delivers.
Absolutely. You see all these posts online that say, like, 0 girls, 0 drugs, 0 profanity, 100% talent.
It's true. He even talks about how he doesn't bring politics into his music. He just keeps it real.
Who's even got time for
real
that?
Music, you might say.
That is the Facebook group that I'm going to spam whenever we do this episode. So if you're listening to this from that group, thanks for clicking on my link. I appreciate it.
Well, before we find out the answers to what we just want to know, I'm going to take this time to say thank you to everyone for listening to the podcast. Thank you for listening and for subscribing. If you are not a subscriber, then you can find everything Discography Discussion at discussmetal.com. We're on Spotify, Apple and Google Podcasts, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher, iHeartRadio. So if you have an Amazon Echo or a Google Home, you have no excuse. Ask it to play the latest episode of the Discography Discussion podcast, and it will. We're also on Facebook and on Twitter at Discuss Metal. Be sure to like, favorite, and subscribe. It really helps us out. It lets us know you're listening. And now Dan is going to tell us all about 5-star reviews.
Hey, we love 5-star reviews here on Discography Discussion. And the reason we like them is that they make me feel good inside. So if you guys want to feel good inside with me, we'll read over a couple of these reviews. David Bunton from The Showdown left us a review on Apple Podcasts saying, talking about metal, killer range of bands covered on this podcast. Thank you, David, and we will actually be hearing from him very soon. Or I don't know how the math works out. I don't think we'll have that episode out yet, but we have it. We can listen to it. So,
do I need to get the time machine and check the future events?
You might need to do that, but let's just say we have quite the conversation with Mr. David Bunton coming up. Fueled by Metal left us a 5-star review. He said, all killer, no filler. Fun and informative and tight. Great perspectives and not bogged down by ads. And I'm really kind of glad that he brought that up because, a lot of podcasts, you're grooving, you're listening, and you're like, wow, this is great. And then they start talking to you about, mattresses or razor blades. And trust me, I'm always waiting for my time to sell out and do said ads. But one way to keep a podcast from having to do ads is to contribute to our Patreon. And there's a lot of you guys that already do. And I'm going to shout them out right now. Alexander, Brian Dean, David Brown, Jeffrey De Los Santos,
The Actual Mac,
Josh Moser, Kiki Kuti, Do You Love Me?
I Do Love You,
Lance Allagood,
The King of Metal,
Native Keebs, Patrick Asplund and Samuel Woodward. You guys are awesome. I like you guys just really have helped this podcast go to the next level, and we could not have done it without you. And for that, we salute you.
So, Dan, tell me about NF.
Well, NF is a rapper from Gladwin, Michigan. His real name is Nathan John Firestein, like Frankenstein, which is what it says on his on all of his pages. So if you can say Frankenstein, you can say Firestein. So it's Frankenstein with fire. What's more brutal than that? NF is interesting. So him being what a lot of people have started to refer to as a Dan Terry special, in that he started off in the Christian music or Christian rap scene. If that's not a thing you guys are familiar with, it actually is real, and real is going to kind of be the word of the night. But I think what's interesting about NF is that he does the Christian rap thing. He doesn't really move away from it like a lot of the people that we talk about on this show, how they start off with one opinion on Christianity and leave with another. It's not really like that, but it's more like he just went mainstream just by being himself. He wasn't an artist that was using religion as a way to get popular.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect way to describe him. He kind of got big by going on, like Toby Mac brought him out on a couple tracks. He kind of made it big with the Dove Awards, which is like the Christian Grammys, if you will, and especially in the first album, we'll just break the ice right now. People compare him to the Christian Eminem, right, which is a little unfair, but I think that, like you said, he broke out later, a couple albums down the road, but never went the whole in-your-face Christian way, which is kind of like a lot of those Christian hardcore and metal bands that you guys always talk about.
Now, are we talking about Mansion, or are we talking about the Moments record from 2010?
Were you talking about Moments?
We can talk about Moments for a little bit. I think Joe listened to it as part of the discography. I think I was like, no, we'll just start with Mansion. But in the spirit of the show, if Joe listened to it, then we'll talk about it.
It's not as good as Mansion, but 2010 Moments by Nathan Firestein.
Yeah, so this was a self-released album, and it's a little. I mean, it's definitely not what I was expecting, because I've heard the NF albums before this. So it's really hard to kind of go back and put yourself in that mindset. This is 5 years before Mansion, and there's no nice way to say it, but you can tell. I mean, it's nowhere close to what he is now as far as talent goes. And it definitely rings true on the song When I Grow Up, when he's all like, I admit the lyrics are weak, but I've been practicing, I'll get good eventually. That's definitely this album. But as far as what he talks about, it's got that aggressive rap tone that he wants to have. He goes hard. His wordplay isn't really that strong. The pace of the songs is very slow, very kind of downtrodden. There's even a guitar solo in one of the songs, which I was just like, well, okay, that's a thing that's there. And yeah, it's definitely not like the best album, but I can definitely see it as being a first step. And it's important, I guess, in that regard, where this is him just trying to do all of it by himself. And it's pretty commendable that he put the album out himself, and that it was a full length. And his emotions are very real. The things that he sings about are very real. That has not changed, but he's definitely a lot better at his craft now.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it. I think it served its purpose. It got him noticed by Capital Christian Music Group. It got him on their radar, got him on Toby Mac's radar, and a couple of the guys that he did guest spots for. But like you said, it just musically wasn't there, lyrically it wasn't there. I didn't know about it because, like you were saying, I started with Therapy, and then kind of worked my way backwards to Mansions, and then reading the lyrics of Mansions, he mentioned this album. I didn't know it existed until I Googled it, and then listened to it on YouTube. I was like, oh yeah, cool. I'm glad I skipped over that one. To be honest,
it's definitely
I'm a huge
not
fan, so that's saying a lot.
Yeah, it's definitely not one that I've gone back to too much. I do like, for whatever reason, I do sometimes like the way, like kind of how lo-fi it is, but that's also being kind of mean, because I'm sure it's not supposed to be lo-fi.
Yeah, exactly.
But
exactly.
I do enjoy the way underground recordings sound, just as I spent so many years doing those type of recordings myself, and it took us a while to get better, to get to a higher level with that. And so that's probably my favorite thing, is that it sounds like an underground rap release, which is cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
2015 Mansion.
Oh, I mean, what a difference 5 years makes.
The attitude is different. The presentation is different. It's more refined. The at-home recording technology advanced so much in that time frame that this was the year we really started to hear the modern sound of metal records, and even, I'm trying to find a nice way to say, the shitty R&B pop music that came out in the early 2000s and up to the mid-2010s. That didn't sound as good as this does. That didn't have as much atmosphere as this does. It's like we had enough to back off of the over-compressed crap and actually give some emotion and feeling and atmosphere back to the music, while still keeping that hip-hop style of everything's hot, everything's center, and this is what I have to say.
Yeah, you said it. Atmosphere is like the key word. I think if you listen to all of NF's albums, he definitely has his own vibe, his own atmosphere, even down to like the album art that he uses and all of his music videos. There's definitely like an NF feel, atmosphere that he has a very deep hand in. And you start seeing it on this album. Obviously a lot heavier later albums. This album still has a couple more pop tracks. This has a couple more like bright R&B tracks. But the thing that I like about Mansion that you kind of lose in later albums, Joe, you were saying it with his Moments album, but there is like some live instruments on this album a little bit more than later. It's not just all heavy hip hop rap beats. Like there's actual drums, there's actual guitars inside the songs, which kind of attracted me a little bit more than some of the other hip hop artists out there.
Yeah, what's interesting about this one is, like you said, the live instruments, and also just the aggression that he comes out just from the gate. Just, I mean, the song called Intro, like, if I'm listening to a hardcore record and there's a song called Intro, I skip that shit and just go right to the first actual song. You do not want to skip NF's intro songs. They are fully fledged, and you know, as we go on, they're going to actually start telling kind of a linear story. It's fun and horribly depressing all at the same time. But yeah, like he comes out of the gate on Intro so hard and so fast that it, you know, a guy like me, because Joe asked, you know, the ultimate question: how'd you even get into this guy? Like with your background and like the stuff that you talk about. And I was like, well, I was just driving with a guy that I was working with, and he was playing a rap playlist, and I heard this like super fast, super aggressive rapper come on, and I'm like,
that wasn't Eminem.
That wasn't Eminem, yeah, and
exactly,
and you know, like relatively clean, you know, and it just didn't, you know, the lyrics weren't about like the usual stuff, and it really grabbed me with the song Mansion. Whenever I went home and listened to it, I was like, man, like there's a later song on Therapy Session where he's like, you know, a guy came up to me and said, we've never met, but I swear you know who I am. Like that is 100% how I felt when I started listening to Mansion. Yeah. Is I was just like, man, like, yeah, like this is how people live their life. And you know, I'm not vain enough to think that it's just me, you know, that relates. Obviously it's a lot of people, but this one really hit me hard, just with the stuff that I deal with, especially with like the idea where he says, you know, I don't fix my problems, I just paint over them. Mm-hmm. You know,
yeah,
like, and that's just like, man, that's kind of like what we are expected to do, you know, especially like, and I know this isn't where he was at the time, but it's definitely where I'm at. Like I'm a dad, I have a job, I spend 90% of my day doing stuff that I don't want to do. You know, and there's no time really in the day for me to address any of that. Like if I'm upset about something, or I'm depressed about something, or I'm, you know, I just don't have the energy to do whatever I have to do. It's like, well, you got to go to work, you got to make money. So you're just going to have to pretend. Yeah, well, Wake Up. Yeah, oh, God, yeah.
That song, man, like the first time I heard that song, the first verse is awesome, but, you know, I can't really relate to being like a rich businessman and that whole first verse that he talks about. But the second verse hit me like a ton of bricks the first time I heard it. And every time I hear it, I just have to stop and just kind of like how you sit around and you look around and everyone else is doing peachy keen. You hop on Instagram and Facebook. Everyone's having like the best time of their life, and you're just kind of like sitting down, miserable, depressed, down on yourself. And just kind of, you know, the end of the song is just, you know, wake up and gives that inspiration to move on. That song, every time I hear it, like it hits me, like you said, it hit me like a ton of bricks. And understand like what he's up against right now in his like quote unquote lane or in his market with like Toby Mac, Trip Lee, Lecrae, Andy Mineo's coming around these time, all these like CHH artists. And then he's rapping about being abused by his mom's boyfriends in Mansion. He has like that whole line about how there's an entire room in Mansions that he won't go into because it's too dark for even him. And he's in this Christian hip hop market talking about this stuff that's just unheard of. And I think that's why it kind of took fire.
That was going to be my question at the start of this episode. What happened between 2010 and 2015 that created this, I don't want to say character, but something happened where he decided to present the dark past with inspirational messages, but it wasn't artificial. It wasn't like he woke up and said, no, I'm going to create this person who had a very dark upbringing and is still dealing with those issues. Between Moments and Mansion, I feel like he started being 100% honest with his audience, and he got credit for it. It wasn't fake. It was, this is exactly what happened to me, and I'm going to tell you how to get through it because I know it's happening to you.
I think he's going to talk a little bit more about that too on the next album, where I think he realized that music is how he's going to get through all that garbage that he went through in his entire life. And instead of trying to make music to please other people, to please a record label, he just made music to help himself. And if people like it, great. If people don't, that's fine. But this is what's going to help me, so I'm going to continue on.
Yeah, absolutely. And this album is unique too in that it is a little bit more inspirational overall, whereas as we get a little bit later into the NF albums, there stops being that positive resolution. Like I call it the Christian rock positive resolution. Where like and I almost wonder with Mansion, as inspirational as it is, I do almost feel like he may have been given parameters where it's like, yeah, you can talk about all this really real stuff, but there has to be some sort of positive vibe to it. And so that's how you get songs like Motivated. You get songs like Turn the Music Up, which are just very upbeat. They're the most positive songs on the album.
So I want to talk about Motivated because Motivated is almost hilarious if you listen to it, if you read the lyrics as you go. NF, he's a lyricist. That's what he is. He says it in his songs all the time. And his hooks aren't really that great. His choruses aren't really that great, but his verses and his lyrics are full on intense. But then you get to Motivated, and 99% of the song is nothing but metaphors. And I almost think that maybe he wrote it as like a tongue in cheek, like, you want me to write pop? You want me to write something upbeat? I'm just going to shove the most cheesy, corny metaphors into every inch of this song. Stuff like, I ain't talking switchfoot when I dare you to move. Talk about how his lyrics are bullets and are aiming at you. I'm starved in Diesel. That's why they call me Riddick. Ulyss. I think it's just tongue in cheek. I think it's hilarious.
This is his version of Y'all Want a Single?
Yeah, exactly.
I do, because I definitely, like, when I hear it, I'm like, is he making fun of other Christian rappers?
He has to be.
Because I feel that way. And the Switchfoot reference really makes me feel like it was a shot at CCM in general.
Big time.
Big time. I'm not talking Switchfoot when it's so funny though. And I still like that song though, because it is still very driving. If you listen too close, you're gonna start laughing. But this album has so much content. The song All I Have, probably my favorite song off of Mansion. This is weird because one of the big issues I have with rap is that I can't really relate to a lot of what they're saying. I think All I Have was the first NF song that I really related to personally, in that he's talking about coming up in rap and trying to make a name for himself and actually be taken seriously, because he's like this white kid from Michigan, that's a Christian, it's all the odds are stacked against him. And, it paralleled a lot for me, as far as being a podcaster and being somebody that, when he starts off, all I ever wanted was somebody to hear me, that's a lot of that is my motivation too, that I just, for whatever reason, want people to hear my point of view on things and to be heard in a way that's not just talking one person to another person. And this song, absolutely, anytime that I'm feeling down or upset or what are we even doing here? Who actually listens, who cares? I'll always listen to All I Have and realize that I'm still mainly doing it for me. and anybody else that's there is just kind of a bonus,
It's pretty funny because I think it was that song. I think that song's on his self-titled EP that Capitol released first.
Yes.
And there's a YouTube video going around of him almost auditioning inside like an office of some Capitol Christian music group like executives. And if you look at him, he doesn't look like NF. Like he looks almost like a feral dog. He has his like baggy clothes on. He has his hoodie up. He's hunched over and he's rapping a cappella, no beat, that first verse of All I Have, as almost like it almost seems like that's his like kind of audition for the record label. So it's funny you brought that up. That inspires you because it always seemed to me that was like the song that kind of broke him into the label.
Yeah, absolutely. If I was an executive, I would have definitely recognized that as straight fire. Because it really is. It's one of his most sincere songs. But I guess we got to get on to Therapy Session because I could talk about Mansion for 4 hours.
I could talk about this album for 4 hours.
2016 Therapy Session.
Man, oh man. So you thought the last album had some dark shit on it?
Dude, there's no pop lyrics anymore, man. It's all substance.
It's over.
Kind of like, he doesn't look back either. It's all forward.
Yeah, he paid his dues as far as like doing what the label wanted on Mansion.
Yeah, I think he realized he kind of stayed his name of like, this is me, this is NF, this is my brand, I'm in control of it, and this is where I want to do. Because like Joe, like you were saying, atmosphere, this album is thick with it, and it just goes higher from here.
I have limited exposure to modern hip hop, but I feel like the underground hip hop artists from 10 years ago are finally starting to get noticed for this style of dark atmospheric hip hop. Basically a different version of what Eminem did way back when and got a lot of credit for. And anybody that did what he did, the fast rapping, the dark loops, everybody said, well, you just ripped him off. But there was an entire subculture of hip hop guys that were doing it the whole time. The name that comes to mind that I keep hearing is Doobie. And I thought, okay, you got a guy who's basically a rock guy doing hip hop. But then Dan pops up with NF and says, this has been here for the past 5 years. You should be listening to this. So there is another guy. There's an entire group of people, but there's another guy that's doing that dark, atmospheric, fast rap hip-hop that I actually like. But the first exposure I had to it was like Stan with Eminem.
Yeah.
And I haven't heard anything in a long time that made me believe that somebody could bring that same feeling with a different message.
Well, yeah, and he even says that in All I Have off Mansion. He's like, you probably think that artist is new. That artist has probably been at it for years.
Yep.
Like, and it's so true that like the way we consume music and the way we think about it. Like a new band signs to Solid State next week, and we're like, oh, they're so great, they're so new. They've got like 3 EPs out. They've been touring for 2 years. Like they're not they're not a new band.
Yeah, they're like a super group from like 4 other bands already like did it and broke up. And you didn't know about it.
Well, hey, we already talked about Demon Hunter, okay? But like Therapy Session is so real that like I almost can't handle it sometimes because it's so fucking dark. Like I will get sad like listening to it, and the single Therapy Session, as far as relatability goes, like that whole like you send me a message and say you'll slaughter my family, like oh my god, like I can relate to that in a big way because that's the price that you pay for putting yourself out there.
Yeah,
you get weirdos, that are gonna send you crazy shit. But then he turns right around and says, I see a lot of talking on socials, but honestly, I don't see nothing in public.
Yep.
And I just have to laugh.
He's it's weird because you look at him, he's this like scrawny little white dude, from Michigan. But I don't know, man. I feel like that if he got pissed off, I wouldn't want to mess because, like that you're talking about in Therapy Session, that one line where he's talking about how a girl went up to him at a show and says that her life's full of drama. Her daddy's abusive, likes to beat up on her mama. And NF's like, well, don't you give me his number? But he can't because what are you going to do? You're going to call him up and he's going to start hitting the mom even harder.
Right.
Like he has this protective mentality over his fans. But then at the same time in the same song talks about how all the attention from his fans also kind of trips him up and puts him in a dark place at the same time. So I feel like that he's bearing his heart on his sleeve, 100% honesty, and it's working. Let's talk about this song. Like, How Could You Leave Us? That song, all of Mansion's built up to this one moment. He alluded to it. He alluded to it in a couple songs, a couple of Mansion, but then you hit, How Could You Leave Us is the reason why NF's here. It's the reason why he's rapping. And that song from start to finish, it builds, it builds, it builds. It pulls your heart out. It stomps on it. It puts it back in. It's just, it's impossible to describe.
I don't get choked up whenever I listen to songs very often. Salty Grave by Life in Your Way notwithstanding, but that's like the only other one. But like this song is so overbearingly just oppressive, but it's beautiful too. Like it's the genuine human emotion that is displayed by Nate on this song is something that I'm not used to experiencing with music.
Yeah.
Like it's not a performance anymore. Like it's not like a finely crafted performance. He's crying at the end of the song, like sobbing.
Literally.
Yeah.
Literally.
And I'm just like that. You can't fake that. You can't just like make up some kind of like performance for that. Like, and the subject matter being so heavy, like when he's like, I want to forgive you, but I want to say I've forgiven you, but it hasn't happened.
Yeah.
Music is the only place I can go to speak to you. I mean, Jesus. I haven't had that experience before, yet for some reason when I'm listening to that song, I'm like right there with him.
Do we know who he's talking about?
He's talking about his mom.
Talk about his mom, yeah.
Yeah, his mom his whole life was addicted to prescription pills, and he talks about it in a bunch of his songs, and this song is kind of like, lays it all out in grave detail. And it's one of those, I'm not a big music video guy, and you watch the music video for this one, and every verse is played out line for line. You get the visuals of everything of, talk about how, he's talking to his mom, but the entire time the social worker's over in a corner, like taking down notes. Or they're waiting at the grandparents' house for the mom to pick him up, and him and his siblings are in the window, and the mom never shows up, and if you can listen to this song and not feel something, if you can watch that music video and not feel something, then you have no heart, because he bears it all out, and it's the most real thing.
I've seen that in person. I've never experienced it, but I've seen that person over in the corner who's here to decide if you're fit. And they're just literally taking notes in the least emotional way possible. And when you see that happen, the only reaction I can have is, why are you here? I'm pissed. Like, I'm angry. I know why. I get it. But it's one of the things that you see it happen and you say, that's bullshit.
Yeah.
So that's just my view.
Yeah, I mean, how many hip-hop albums do you listen to that make you feel like this?
Not very many.
This one.
And how many hip hop artists out there are secure enough with their emotions to literally just record yourself crying for a minute and a half at the end of it? Like, none of that was planned out. He didn't write that down. That had to be just him crying in a studio. It's brutal.
I wonder if he did that in one shot and said, leave it all in.
Yeah. Probably didn't say anything. Probably just walked off. And they're like, "Oh,
headphones off.
I guess we're done." Yeah, like I mean, what else can you do? It wouldn't be me if I didn't talk a little bit of trash on this album. The only thing about Therapy Session is I think it's beautiful from beginning to end. I really do. But in comparison to Mansion, it doesn't have these straight ahead driving hits that Mansion did. When you go from How Can You Leave Us over to you start with Therapy Session, which is track 2. The intro's really fast, but then you have I Just Want to Know, How Could You Leave Us, Breathe, Real, Oh Lord, I Can Feel It, Got You on My Mind. This record doesn't pick up until track 10.
Well, I'm gonna have to. Real is my favorite NF song of all time, and I feel like that song from beginning to end, like it's a diss track. He talks about how like he's gonna take a machete and cut off the ladder from behind him so no one can follow him up the ladder.
Right.
Like and that was like the first song that I was like, man, I wonder if like I wonder if I could sit down and learn the lyrics and rap alongside him, because some of those bars in like the second and third verses are so blindingly fast that he hits. By far, hands down, my favorite NF song. But you're right. As the album progresses, it's not as 1-2-1-2 as Mansion would be. There's a lot more filler on this album.
Yeah, I agree. And it's not even that it's not as heartfelt or whatever. Like I'm into a song like I Can Feel It, Got You on My Mind and stuff. Like I get all of that. However, it just doesn't, like, the reason I listen to NF is because it's so aggressive. And this is kind of that weird dichotomy where you just want you want your favorite artist to just be angry and upset all the time.
Yeah.
And I mean, you do get that. It's not like any of those songs are happy songs. I don't think there's any happy songs on any of his albums.
There's a couple here and there, but then you get like hype songs like Grindin. Like, yeah. I think I was texting you earlier today. It's the first song I ever heard by him. I forget how I found it. And it's a hype song all the way through. It's all about, grinding, getting to the top. But then there's still like lyrics in that song where he talks about like, put me in a room full of rappers, come back in 5 minutes, I'll be the only one still alive with a note on my chest saying I did it. Like,
yeah.
And he's still like heavily in the Christian scene, talking about murdering a bunch of rappers in a room and taking credit for it.
Which is funny because in a couple of tracks before, he's like, you're saying my music is violent? You got to be kidding me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I guess your definition of violence and mine is something we look at differently. It's hilarious, man.
Yeah, you get in 8 tracks later.
Statement, man.
Like,
Statement, like, is just dripping with atmosphere. Like, even from the beginning, it's that creepy intro with just like I don't even know what you would call it, and then the whole song just sounds like that he was just freestyling and hit record from start to finish.
Yeah,
I love
totally.
that. I love that.
Those are fun.
Yeah,
it's definitely a better B-side than an A-side on this record, for sure.
Yeah.
Just, I feel like it really picks up. All I Do is also kind of a hype song. Yeah. And I'm totally cool with that. I love All I Do and Grindin and Therapy Session. I find myself skipping over a lot of the record. And again, it's not because it's not good. It's just not why I'm here. It's like when your favorite metal band decides to put out like 4 metal songs and then like a whole bunch of indie tracks, in between.
Yeah.
It's not that they're
the
bad.
Ballads.
It's just not why you showed up.
I was texting you about it before too. Like, I skip over those every single time if I'm in a mood to listen to NF. But then, going through this past week trying to listen to every song in a discography and actually listen to those R&B songs, you can appreciate he has a good voice. I think I was like, he can actually sing. I think he shows his singing chops on this. But it's not something that I'm gonna willingly listen to if I want to listen to some heavy gangster rap coming from NF.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if gangster rap is where we'd go with that. We're metal guys trying to talk about rap. It's hilarious.
There you go. It's amazing.
But it gets really, like, Therapy Session was a huge hit for NF. Like just straight fire. Like it put him in the public perception because you can't be that raw with people and people not take notice. You just can't. Like, game over. Yeah. And so I remember after Therapy Session, I was like, how is he going to follow this up? And he had the same question in intro 3.
Perception, 2017.
So you guys remember how in Mansion he said, fear moved into my house, I let him in? I've been dealing with him ever since. I thought that he would leave, but he never did. He must have packed up, or he must have, set up his stuff and settled in. So intro 3 is him having a conversation with Fear.
Hello, me. Meet the real me.
And even though his music's not violent, he does hit Fear in the head with a shovel and throw him into an open grave.
I thought you were going to say a ditch.
Fear dug for him. He had Fear dig his own grave.
He did.
He said he threw him in.
It was great. And like the whole back and forth of him and Fear talking to each other, and he's like such a, like, Fear is such a dick. Like, he's like making fun of like really important stuff, and he's all like, what did he say? Something about how I wish mom. He goes, remember you were crying like a baby, saying I wish mom was here. Yeah, we all do, so we wouldn't have to hear about it every single record.
Yeah, and have to show total self-awareness, making fun of himself.
Yeah,
I love it.
They're out there digging a hole, and he's like, what are we gonna do? Throw a track? Dig a grave and throw a beat in it, and then rap about it for like 3 minutes. Like, hey, that's really deep, isn't it?
It's pretty deep, isn't it? Yeah. I love it. tongue in cheek, making fun of himself.
Oh yeah, and then there was I like it too whenever he's like he throws him in the open grave, and then he goes, my therapist said not to bury my problems, but honestly, I'm feeling great.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just so like, and we've reached a point now though on Perception where he is so metaphorical now. Like that's a huge change, because Mansion, it was mostly real with some metaphor. Therapy Session was very, very real. Perception's the first one where we're going to start getting really deep into metaphor.
Yeah.
Like really deep. Outcast, this is NF with the cage and the keys, and and he's telling this big story. And I'm not going to go through the entire story here because there's just not enough time. But basically, like, he is battling his own demons. And you start realizing that even though Therapy Session was such a big hit, and really, like, Let You Down off of this album was, like, a huge hit, like, made him super famous. His most popular song. Triple platinum, dude. Yeah.
Yeah. So this album, like, I don't know. I think it's peak depression NF. And I remember when it came out, I was listening to it. And I was like, man, there's like no hope in this album. Like you were saying, later on albums have very little hope compared to Mansion. There's like zero hope on this album. And he talks in The Search how during this album cycle, he had a complete mental breakdown, started going to see a therapist, actually got diagnosed OCD. Like so much good happened from this album with Let You Down going triple platinum. This was the first time I ever heard NF on the radio. And I remember watching the Mayweather Pacquiao fight on pay-per-view, and they used the NF song as the intro. He started going on tour with Logic. He's getting he's out of the Christian market, and he's actually relevant in the mainstream market. Met his future wife, but then everything going on in the background, no matter how many millions he's making and all the fame, man, he's just down and depressed, and it shows in the songs and these lyrics.
Yeah, he couldn't handle it. It was just too much. Yeah. And really these songs, and it's funny because what you're talking about, the breakdown and everything that he had, from this album cycle was all written at, we won't actually see that until we get to The Search, where he's dealing with the aftermath of all of that. But on Perception, this was just him dealing with the success that he had on Therapy Session, and didn't know how he was going to follow it up, and didn't know how he was going to, survive or be relevant. And, you can definitely tell from Intro 3 that, he's throwing out all the things that he thinks people think about him. And that's the saddest part of it. But this album is so deeply metaphorical that I have to admit that without maybe... I love Outcast. I love Intro 3, obviously. I like Let You Down. I like You're Welcome. I like Lie. But beyond that, everything else is so metaphorical to me that I do have a little bit more trouble relating to it overall as I have, stuff that was on, Mansion and Therapy Session.
Yeah, some of my favorite songs are on this album, like the ones you mentioned, and then Destiny, No, Outro, they're all really fun songs, but as a whole, it's probably my least favorite NF record just for relatability. And actually going back and listening to it, I don't think it moves as a whole as Mansion and Therapy did, especially with the storyline.
I want to talk about Let You Down for a second, because I think it is one of the strongest NF songs ever. And it is so on brand for him. It gives you everything that you like about NF, despite whatever, your preference may be. You get the fast raps. You get the slower, more heartfelt singing choruses, like the pop stuff. But you also get that very real emotion with him talking about his relationship with his dad. I mean, is Let You Down not the most fucking relatable song?
It has to be.
Oh my God.
Absolutely, it has to be.
I get why it was such a huge hit, because literally anybody can listen to that song. Whether it's about your dad, your mom, or a family member, or a close friend, or an ex-relationship, you can apply this song to anybody that's ever pissed you off, or somebody that you felt like you needed to impress that you just couldn't ever impress.
Yeah.
For me, it's my brother,
Okay.
And that line where he's like, oh, you want to be friends now? Okay, let's put my fake face on and pretend now. We can laugh about the good times that didn't even happen. I mean, why are you laughing? He's like, I'm trying hard to find a reaction but at least you're happy. You know, like
Yeah. The one always hit me was like that's parents for you, very loyal. Should have had my back, but you put a knife in it. My hands are full. What else should I carry for you? You know, I care for you, but it feels like we're on the edge right now. Man, that whole line, like you said, it could be about parents, siblings, friends, anything. But just the feeling of like, no matter what I do, no matter what I'm trying to do for you, nothing's ever good enough. And I just always feel like I'm letting you down. Man, it's killer.
Absolutely. It's probably his best song. It's not my favorite, but it's his best.
It's no wonder why it blew up so big the way it did.
There's also a really funny video on YouTube of him performing the song and he forgets the lyrics halfway through. So he just starts freestyling. Yeah.
I never saw that.
It's hilarious. It is really funny. There's so many
funny.
great videos online of NF stopping songs like mid-set. Like at one point he like stopped the whole show and kicked a drunk guy out because he was like hassling people. It's kind of like what you were saying about how he has that protective, you know, that protectiveness of his fans. And so like if anybody's getting hassled or hit or anything and he sees it from the stage, he'll like stop the show and be like, you know, get out, you know, which there aren't a whole lot of other people that do that kind of thing. And he's kind of become famous for it. Although he did say in an interview, he's like, I know that's not like the professional thing to do. He's like, but he's like, I can't help it. He's like, I see it and I have to do something about it.
When has he not just done his own thing though? His entire career.
That's very true.
2019, The Search.
Oh, fuck me. It's a 72-minute album.
Well, it's that when you said that when you're like, hey, do you want to do the NF episode with me? I was like, yeah, sure, let's do it. And you're like, you're going to have to listen to all 3,000 tracks of The Search, though, because up to that point, I still haven't yet.
I'm not used to albums that have 19 songs on them unless it's like a grindcore album or something. The Search starts off really fucking strong with the song The Search. Hey, Nate, how's life? I don't know. It's all right. That really sums it up, man. Like and then he just goes into it. He's like, last year I had a breakdown. You know, like we're up to date. Like you don't need a 24-hour news source for Nate. Like he is his own news source. He's like, yeah. So here's what took place. I just sold the biggest album of my entire career. I now have all this money. I have all the fame. I have everything that I ever dreamed of being a little kid wanting to be a rapper. But oh shit, I'm still Nate and I'm still fucked up. Why is that? And that's what this album's about.
Yep, it's all him trying to find it. Notably, the first NF album that doesn't start with an intro, and I think that's fitting because he ended the last album with outro. So I'm glad he didn't do outro, intro 4. That would have been weird. But The Search is a perfect intro to the whole album. You know, it's weird starting an album off with a title track for him, but it fits.
It totally fits, and he comes so hard into it.
Mm-hmm.
Like this song is so packed full of lyrics that you can actually understand, Joe, if you listen to him slowly.
I've got a speed control on this thing.
I mean, that whole, like, you know, he goes on this huge rant about, like, you know, you try to suffocate it, hoping it dies, and then it rises up like an evil surprise. And he's like, and then he's like, you don't relate to that? You must not be as crazy as I am. Like, and it's just like, but everybody can relate. Like, he's still got that relatability, even though he's like a millionaire now. I'm still relating to this dude on a personal level. When he says, you know, he said, I've been going through some things like every human being and didn't really sleep well last night. Yeah, dude.
I know the feeling. You know that thing that happens to you and then people ask you what's wrong and then you have to talk about it to feel better and people tell you should talk about it. And then when you're not done talking about it, everybody's tired of hearing you talk.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yep.
He talks about that, too.
Everybody said, talk about your feelings. And then they say, why are you still talking? I love it.
There's a word for that. It's called support exhaustion. There are people out there that, unfortunately, in our lives can be very toxic. And they can be very, like, they always have a fucking problem. The difference between that sort of person and somebody like Nate is that Nate presents it in such a way that's very enjoyable to listen to. There's no other way to say it, because
describing it.
I do feel like if I was like best friends with Nate, it would be exhausting. Just like a lot of my friends, you know, Joe, I mean, can attest to this. Being friends with me is very exhausting.
Not all the time.
Not all the time, because a lot of the times I just stuff down what's going on or what I'm upset about or whatever, and I just show up and do the job, like I was talking about last time. You know, I've done podcast episodes where I'm like, fuck, I'd rather be doing something else.
You know?
I mean, and amplify that to like my day job. Every time you go to work, you're like, fuck, I'd rather be doing something else, you know? And this record really takes a lot of that and pours it out on the floor for you to kind of just go through and build whatever you can out of it. And he comes back in strong with Leave Me Alone, which is, you know, again, a song where he has so many people commentating on him or to him, kind of like what we're doing. But like there's so many voices now because he's so popular that it's just noise in his head. And this dude's already got a whole bunch of voices in his head on top of that. So you've got all this like external noise and this internal noise at war with each other.
Yeah, it's just like intro 3 from the last album where it's just him talking to himself the entire time, because he talks to himself in like a plural sense. So he's like, I hate when they debate we're underrated, we're so overlooked that they're looking over our numbers. Nathan, he's just talking to himself the entire album, or the entire song, you know. Talking about how we don't post enough on our socials, you know, they want another album, and you know, did we give you new music last week? You know, he talks a lot about, and I think it's a perfect product of, you know, in between last album and this album, he started going, like he self-proclaimed, started going to therapy, got diagnosed OCD. He got married, and apparently she's a strong enough woman to handle him, you know. And it's just him processing through everything that he's been going through. I think it's awesome. But he still says stuff like, hold up my balloons to cover my face. I still feel them weighing on me every day. I should let them go and watch them float away, but I'm scared to, then I'll be more afraid. Like, he still has all of his problems because he knows it's what makes him.
Yeah, and the symbolism of the balloons is so genius because, you know, if you listen to enough NF, you know that the black balloons signify his stress and his inner demons and his struggles. But they're also balloons. Like, he could let them go at any time. Mm-hmm. But he even says, you know, in the search, I'm leaving behind my burdens. Well, I brought a few of them. I'm not perfect. And like, you know, and he's still holding those balloons. But that line that he throws out, we're so overlooked, they're looking over our numbers, Nathan. What was funny about that, I felt, was that like he's that super popular millionaire rapper that no one's ever heard of. Yeah. It's so weird because like I show NF to people all the time and I'm like, oh, he's huge. I mean, look at his YouTube videos. They got millions and millions of views. Like, he's a big deal. People know about this guy. He sells out everywhere he plays. And everybody's like, no, I've never heard of him before. And so that lyric is like him trying to make sense of that too, where he's like, well, we're so overlooked. They're looking over our numbers. Like, how can these be his numbers when he's not like, you know, on MTV? Well, nobody's on MTV anymore, but you know what I mean? Like, he's not in the
reruns of your favorite TV shows from WB in the 90s are on MTV right now.
Oh, that's cool. Let's go do that instead. But I think,
well, it's weird because this music's getting out because, like, I even was texting you watching the Super Bowl. In the beginning of the Super Bowl, they used one of his songs from, like, I think Mansion, or it was a Mansion or the EP. It was like a really old song. I was like, why are they playing this? But, you know,
because Capitol gave him a good price on it.
Exactly. Okay, it's true.
Because that's one thing that we haven't really talked about, is that this album is completely just him, as far as him putting it out on his own label.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think that's part of the success there. He cut out the middleman. He's like, if I'm getting these kind of numbers, why the hell can't I just put it out myself and it be just as big? And it absolutely was that. It was the smartest decision he ever made. And he actually started that in Perception, I believe, too, which was, I think, a kind of a joint effort between his own label and Capitol. So that was just one of those, like, you know, the lightning struck just right to where it was such a mega hit, mostly because of Let You Down. And that's the funniest thing. He says, you know, a lot of people have never heard of me. He's like, but then I start playing Let You Down, and they're like, oh, it's this guy. You know?
I know him.
Yeah.
Well, I think now is the time for the hip-hop audience and the artists to do the independent releases. I want to compare what you just said to what Trent Reznor said like 20 years ago. Why do I need a record label? But he does. I don't think NF or any of his peers need a label the same way now, because their market, their fans, are deep into the social media. So no, he doesn't need the help. He's got all the tools he needs.
Yeah, especially in the hip hop community, because like SoundCloud rappers are like the thing now. Like, they're the ones that you can produce an entire album on your MacBook, you know, in your basement, and put it out, and actually sounds good. It sounds quality, and a lot of these guys are getting noticed for that. But NF just does what NF does and starts his entire record label, and I think that's something we haven't talked about really yet. up to now is just the business genius that Nate has, the business mind that he has, where he, even back in Mansions, he kind of, I'm not sure how much was the record label or him, but he definitely picked a brand, he picked a style. He has one dude do all of his music videos for him, so it has that same aesthetic and that same atmosphere and that same feel. And up until now he has his own record label. He's just calling the shots, but it feels great.
Yeah, completely. And some of the topics that he tackles on this record are very like it's like Let You Down times 10 in the sense that he goes for the throat on relatability. The Search and Leave Me Alone are very deeply personal, but I mean, Change, My Stress, Time, When I Grow Up, those are all relatability songs, like 100%. Like My Stress is probably my favorite NF song because it's absolutely how I feel most of the time. Like this idea of like, like for me, obviously I'm not as popular as Nate is or ever will be, but I just get Facebook messages all day. And I try to be like, because we had a kind of an infamous interview that we did a couple weeks ago now, maybe a couple months ago when this posts, but I got so much attention from that, positive or negative, where I was getting messages every day, and there were comments all day, every day, and I had to and I felt like as the content creator that I had to more or less like speak on behalf of that stuff and respond, because like my whole shtick has always been like, I want to be super real with people, and I want to, if somebody sends me a message, I'm going to personally respond, and I'm going to personally comment on whatever the comment was, or clear up any questions that anybody might have, yada, 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 yada. And, my wife had to sit me down, and she's like, yeah, but there comes a certain point where you're trying to be super real with people, but you're also being super fake. You're putting on your podcaster face and putting on a smile. She's like, you don't want to talk about all this stuff. Like, you did something and you kind of just want it to be done and move on for it. But it's like, where he says in the song, like, some days I don't want to see or have a bunch of people to impress. I just want relief from my stress. Like, that's how I feel. Like, every time it's like, so-and-so wants to connect with you on Messenger. So-and-so, or you get an email in the podcast email. And I'm not saying by any stretch that I don't enjoy getting those emails from people or anything like that, or that I have a problem with it. But like, my issue is I just always want to instantaneously respond instead of just being like a normal person and being like, you know what? I'm going to respond to Facebook messages on Tuesdays. and then on, and then on Saturday. And so the song My Stress really was influential in kind of changing my mindset about that kind of stuff. And it was really relatable for me because I know Nate's got it probably 400,000 times worse. You can't get a direct line to Nate. You can't just like send him a message on Facebook or send him an email or, and if you can, you guys should definitely, let us know. But
I was going to say, we're going to try.
We're going to try really hard. We're going to try really hard. But, it's one of those things where that's totally relatable. Like, I go to church every Sunday and I don't really fit in with that. Anybody that's listened to my shows knows that like there's a little bit of a separation between like mainstream Christianity and like guys like me, or even guys like Nate, or anybody that's just a little bit more off the beaten path. And it's like, my wife's always like, can't you try to get along with these people more, or like try to relate to them, or try to and my response is always like, I don't want to see or have a bunch of people to impress.
Yeah.
I
just change yourself so you can fit in with someone else.
Yeah,
be the black sheep.
Yeah, and that's the road to fakeness, and people can detect that fakeness.
Yeah.
And so for a song like My Stress, like that was massively influential to me.
Time hit me the hardest, man, with like that was like the first song that he kind of wrote up directly about his wife after they got married before this album came out. And the whole album is just like, their whole song is like just him apologizing for being a prideful, egotistical, jerk. Some of the lyrics, like, even if we both break down tonight and you say you hate me and we go to bed angry, I know everything will be all right. I'll be here waiting. I promise I'm changing. I just need time. Like this, I was reading the lyrics. I've heard the song so many times, but just sitting down and actually reading the lyrics, man, I was like, dude, this is exactly how my wife and I argue, after almost 10 years. This is like line for line what we do. where it's even says like way before I bought you the ring, we were fighting back and forth like you were wearing the thing. Like I think about our engagement and the arguments we got in, like almost like a 5, 10, 15-year married couple. But but then he comes to the realization of like, I got a lot of issues. I'm trying to work through them. Going to therapy for you is something that's worth doing. Like this album, I feel like the hope kind of came back where it was missing a little bit from Perception and Therapy, where, whatever he did in between these past 2 albums, it works. And the search that he's on, he's finding the answers. Going back to like the song right before this, or a couple tracks before this, Changes, he has like the most, I think, intense line out of all 4 of his albums, where he says, positive thoughts on my rivals, I'm trying to be on their side though, should I feel comfortable, I don't, last year I felt suicidal, this year I might do something different, like talking to God more. Like something that small and simple, but just when he just flat out says last year I felt suicidal, man, like it almost like it jolts you, it makes you stop.
Definitely. And he talks a lot about things that he worries about too. Not to make this whole episode about the song My Stress, but like when he says, I'm waiting to get that phone call that says that records are not selling, and that this is all over. And then, what am I going to be, after this is all over? Will I have found any kind of peace? And then he kind of continues that with the song Nate, which is a song basically him talking to his younger self, like if he was talking to himself when he was like, 6 or 8 years old or something. And
you mean Nate's talking to himself? That's not characteristic.
This is different, okay? But yeah, with that song, I mean that song really gives me chills. Especially whenever he says, like he tells him, he's like, when you're this age, you're gonna drop a album, you're gonna call it Mansion, and then Therapy's gonna come, and Perception's gonna be huge, and you're gonna make millions, and you might get some satisfaction from your successes, but then you're just gonna make another goal that doesn't lead to freedom. It's like, holy shit, like, because it's asking that question, when is enough enough?
Yeah, and that whole song, like on every album, he talks about his what happened with his mom, where it's like the pills took your mom, or how he's talking about on the first album with his he finds a girl and they both relate to their hatred of pills. But then on that song Nathan, he talks about he alludes to why would you leave us, or how could you leave us? And he's like, something's going to come. And he doesn't actually mention it, because it's actually him talking to his younger self. He doesn't want to, give any, I don't want to say spoilers, but he doesn't want to give any spoilers to his younger self. But that whole song's powerful.
It really is. I mean, it's one of those, like, really makes you think. But then at the same time, he comes back with When I Grow Up, which I think is kind of the positive spin on the song Nate. And When I Grow Up, I mean, is super relatable for anybody that's tried to do a creative endeavor, whether it be a band, a rap career, a movie maker, anything that you do creatively, you can relate to When I Grow Up, where it's like, dude, you're gonna like self-promote so hard and nobody's gonna give a shit, like, at all, ever, and you're just gonna have to deal with that. Like that's just the way it's gonna be, because eventually you're gonna break through if you grind hard enough. Which I agree with and I don't agree with at the same time, because, like, I've been in bands, and the reason those bands didn't succeed wasn't due to any lack of wanting it by me. Granted, as a rapper, I think it can sometimes be a little easier because it's just you. But, like, when you're, like, in a metal band or something, like, you're relying on people to show up every week.
Yeah.
You can't just do it on your own. So, like, you only hear about the success stories. That's kind of the only criticism I have for When I Grow Up, is that as inspirational as it is, it's a success story coming from something that's already a success. Whereas there are tons of rappers out there that I'm sure are just as real as NF that we're never going to hear about because they gave up, or because life got in the way. And it wasn't because they didn't want it. They just, for whatever reason, lightning didn't strike the same way for them as it did for Nate. But at the same time, that doesn't take away from his story and what he did to get to this point, So, like, for me as a podcaster, like, I definitely, can really relate to When I Grow Up, because it's like, whenever I'm just trying to explain to people what a podcast even is, or why we do it, everybody's like, oh, it's like the radio, right? I was like, well, I mean, it's kind of like the radio, but it's not really, because I can say fuck whenever I want to, but But beyond that, that's kind of the issue I have with relating to those church friends. But no, like the biggest thing is that you can't ever really convince anybody to check something out just because you want them to. And that's what that song's about. He's like, well, I'm just going to get good, and then they're not going to have any choice but to pay attention. And really that should be all of our goals, right?
Yeah.
Eventually we have to just get so good at what we're doing that people can't help but stop and watch.
Final thoughts on NF. I'm going to go first because I think I have the least to say right now. I'm glad I know about it. I'm glad Dan decided to do this show because I like listening to artists that don't do the same thing that everybody else is trying to shove down my throat and make me pay attention to, make me spend my money on. I feel like NF is one of those jewels inside of hip-hop that most people wouldn't pay attention to him if they listened to what he was actually saying, because what they want to hear is not what he's talking about. But because he's so good at what he does, he has fooled you into coming into his universe, into his atmosphere. He's putting together the story of Nate, and you aren't just enjoying what you're hearing, you're relating to it, and you want to hear more. This isn't your run-of-the-mill bullshit R&B, so you should be listening to it. David, final thoughts?
I agree, man. I'm biased. NF is one of my favorite artists right now, but he's great rap, great lyrics. I feel like that if anyone is looking for just hard-hitting, in-your-face hip-hop, NF's your go-to guy. If you're looking for catchy hooks, he's not it. If you're looking for if I can say infectious beats, he's not it, but he takes you on that journey. He takes you on the journey of his life, the atmosphere, and if you want to go along for the ride, he's the guy for you. Just get ready to get a little angry and cry a little bit, maybe.
I'm going to challenge you on that because he does have infectious beats. His beats sound epic, but they don't sound artificially epic. It's the difference between the movie trailer and the actual film score. And I don't know what it is. But if somebody else made the same music that he's making, the beats would be twice as loud.
So you got me, and I'm kind of impressed that I got called out and schooled by Joe on a hip-hop topic. I'm for it. Congratulations, Joe. You grew a lot this week, buddy.
Come fight me. That's the audio junkie, though. That's me listening to what's actually being put down and saying, this doesn't sound like everybody else. What's different? I don't know. I haven't figured it out yet with NF.
I listen to NF for the lyrics, and I think that's where he shines. He even says that he came into the game as a lyricist, and he's going to leave like that. Period. So I don't. There's a couple other like artists out there that I listen to the songs because I like the way the beat sounds. But him, I'm like trying to pick out the lyrics because I want to hear what he has to say.
Final thoughts on NF, Dan?
This is hard. With final thoughts, I always struggle with these because it's like I feel like whenever I give quote unquote the final word, on what I think is something, I feel differently about NF every day, dude. Like there's songs that I relate to so much and so deeply, and I don't really even like hip hop, guys. Like really not that much. And so like
it's okay, Dan. You can like hip hop.
I can't tell you why, but I guess the whole thing is like I'm not the most qualified person in the world to tell you what is good and what isn't good hip hop. But what I can tell you is that his music and his lyrics affected me in a very profound way. And the fact that he plays a genre that I am not as familiar with as maybe I should be, like that it can cut through all the bullshit that my bullshit process, which is like, I listen to a band. Well, how heavy is this? Well, how heavy is it in comparison to this? What genre does this fit into? What nice little bow can I wrap this up in and say my piece about and feel good about myself afterwards? I can't really do that with NF because I don't listen to enough of this kind of music to really say like, because he could be like, in the eyes of the mainstream, be the shittiest rapper on the face of the earth. But I wouldn't know. All I would really know is that his music affected me in a very profound way, enough for me to break the mold of my heavy metal show or whatever to talk about it because I felt like it was that important, and that I just wanted to really get to the core of how it made me feel and why. And I appreciate you guys going on that journey with me. And I think, if you're not sure about something like NF, or if you're only somebody that listens to metal, I will tell you that me personally, I still love metal. It's still my favorite genre. Sometimes you have to pay attention to what is being said more so than what's being played. And that's I guess that's my final thought on NF. I mean, it could change, but don't send me 10,000 Facebook messages asking me, if it changed, because I was bitching about that earlier.
You might say this was a therapy session for you, Dan, to do a little bit of hip hop and something not hardcore or metal.
Yeah, but I mean, it is hardcore in its way.
Absolutely.
It's some of the most hardcore lyricism I've ever heard. Like ever.
It's packaged up a little bit differently.
It's packaged up differently, and it's a little poppy, and my wife doesn't mind whenever I listen to it in the car.
Exactly.
As much fun
my
as
wife and I can listen to together.
Yeah, as much fun as it is where it's like, where are we going today? Oh, we're gonna have a 45-minute drive. Great. Well, we can listen to all of Extol's Undeceived before we get there. She's not as into that. Search. So, but right. Like pop on the search, because then you can drive 45 minutes and then drive home, and then go out and get some stuff that you forgot to get when you were out before, and then also have a few tracks left for the drive to work the next day.
There you go.
David, what's your album of the week?
Disconnected by Nothing Left, if I could tie everything back to Face Down Records, which is what I do most of the life. But Nothing Left, a super group of hardcore metalcore with a little bit of panic chords in there, and it's gonna be great.
Dan, what about you?
I kind of keep going back to Norma Jean because I got All Hail for my birthday on vinyl, and I've been listening to that over and over and over and over again. And I love the shit out of All Hail, and you should too, because Norma Jean.
If you believed it was impossible for this podcast to break the mold enough to talk about a hip-hop artist, I'm going to tell you about an artist that I have loved and listened to religiously ever since I first saw him play with a portion of his band on Austin City Limits PBS. Damien Rice, his first record, O, is still one of the best records I've ever listened to.
Great album.
And you should be listening to it, because that is an artist that I could do an entire episode on because of how much variety he throws into his music.
See, whenever I say no, you can use this episode against me as your bargaining chip.
I would ask the audience first and then tell you that I already asked them, though.
That is how I made all of this happen.
I told Dan last night that I thought this was a prank. He's like, "Are you ready for tomorrow?" I was like, "Yeah." I keep on thinking you're going to tell me, "Hey, just kidding, we're not actually doing the episode."
It's too early in the year for that.
That'd be pretty dickish.
Take us out, DFT.
Have you ever been listening to this podcast and thought to yourself, why do they keep talking about these bands? And now they're talking about a rapper. Like, I have legitimate suggestions of bands they should talk about. Send us those suggestions. You can send us an email at danandjoeshow@gmail.com. You can hit us up on Facebook at facebook.com/discography discussion. You can talk to us on Twitter at discussmetal or at discussmetaldan or discussmetaljoe. You can reach out to us on our Discord server. There'll be a link in the show notes that'll take you right to the wonderful world of Discord. And you can also reach out to us on Instagram now under Discography Discussion. So, I mean, we're all over the place, man. We're at all the places where the kids are. So you can feel free to drop your band suggestions or just say hello. I promise I won't, bark back or be angry.
And on that note, this has been episode 158 of Discography Discussion. Thank you for listening. You can like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at discussmetal. Subscribe to our podcast everywhere you listen to podcasts, including Google Play, Apple Podcasts, and Stitcher. Visit discussmetal.com for all things discography discussion. And please send questions and comments to danandjoeshow@gmail.com. If you are not a patron, you can become one at patreon.com/discussmetal. We have some sweet perks.
Give me your money!
Rap.